Hey guys, my name is Allison, and today I'll be talking about the economic impacts of COVID-19. There is no doubt that the global pandemic has changed our lives and our spending routines in some way or another. With so many businesses and restaurants closing down, most Americans are spending significantly less in person and more online. This has caused major economic shifts over the last few weeks, with very little time to plan for such a crisis. As most businesses are now mostly entirely online, many small, local firms are struggling. So what is an economy? Well, that's a good question. An economy is the production, input, and trade of goods and services amongst firms, consumers, and the government. Economies are very complex with many factors, which makes them very prone to the snowball effect, which means when one thing is blocked up, so is everything else. This is also known as cause and effect. So what is scarcity? Scarcity is when the demand for a product, good, or service is too high for the market to keep up with. This means that the demand for the good is greater than the supply. This causes a shortage of that good, which can then be referred to scarcity. So what resources are actually scarce right now? Many items that have never been considered to be scarce are now experiencing shortages. This is because the demand for items such as hand sanitizer, toilet paper, and face masks has increased significantly over a short period of time. The market is not able to keep up with such high demand so suddenly, causing a shortage. Because there is such a high demand for sanitary products right now, many stores such as Costco and Target have put restrictions on how much a consumer can buy of that product at once. The government is directly trying to supply healthcare workers with the personal protective equipment that they need to be safe, but distribution is not evenly distributed across the board. This is because some major cities need more supplies than others. So how exactly is the government doing this? FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association, is allocating its resources to areas that are in most need, such as New York. As an attempt to unite private sectors, a subunit of FEMA has started giving prioritization recommendations to private sectors. The recommendations inform private sectors, federal, state, and local governments about operations and resource allocation. So why now are we experiencing shortages? The demand for sanitary products has increased dramatically since the start of the pandemic. Most Americans were not regularly using such high quantities of some sanitary products, such as hand sanitizer. With the increased millions all of a sudden buying so much of one good, the market simply just can't keep up. This creates a shortage, which puts scarce resources at risk of price inflation if price ceilings aren't used by the government. So what is opportunity cost? By textbook definition, it is the loss of potential gain from other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. This just means weighing the pros and cons of decisions we make. I like to think of it as a balancing scale. The benefits of social distancing. By social distancing, we are slowing down the spread of the virus. This is important because the longer we do it, the sooner things can try to get back to normal. But at the same time, the longer we do it, the more the economy will suffer. Well, why is that? So here are the downsides of social distancing. Social distancing is crucial to slow down the spread of the virus, but it does not benefit the economy as much. Many firms cannot operate being socially distanced, causing them to temporarily close down or even go bankrupt. This means that all of those employees are now unemployed with no income. For example, there are now over 20 million Americans who are unemployed, which means that 20 million consumers are not spending on unnecessary goods. This means that those people will only be buying the essentials. Even those who can work outside of their homes right now are having to choose between work and their children, since all daycare facilities are closed. Building off of the school issue, there are millions of students not learning crucial skills right now. The age group that will be hit the hardest are the first and second graders who are just learning how to read. This will have an impact on their success in future grade levels. Social distancing guidelines have even made a huge impact on the restaurant industry as well. Even when restaurants reopen, they will have to adhere to the social distancing guidelines, which means separating tables. Doing so will decrease the capacity in the restaurant and therefore decrease the number of customers being sold food, which will decrease their revenue. Social distancing will benefit the majority socially, but as a result, we will suffer economically. So how is the pandemic affecting demand for goods and services? The global pandemic has had a significant effect on how people are spending their money. As nearly every American is staying home now, they are not eating out, shopping in retail stores, or traveling. The travel industry is suffering a lot as a result of the pandemic because it's very elastic. It is far from necessary for most people, and as overall spending has decreased, luxury trips are not priority. Since most people are functioning almost entirely online right now, there has been an increase in demand for mobile products such as Amazon and delivery services. E-commerce is becoming more and more inelastic, while in-person shopping and experiences are becoming more elastic as there are more online options now. Unemployment. As I had touched on earlier, the unemployment rate is at a record high right now. For an economy to be thriving, there needs to be a flow of money and resources. When a consumer all of a sudden doesn't have an income, they stop being so much of a consumer. This means that they quit buying unnecessary goods and services that they had previously been purchasing. Having such a high unemployment rate puts a strain on the labor market, which we will dive deeper into. Going a little bit deeper into the demand and supply of labor, I'm going to start with demand. Right now, there are millions of people looking for work, but there aren't millions of jobs available. The majority of companies are laying workers off right now, while only a few are hiring. Some of the industries thriving right now include, but are not limited to, grocery stores, tech companies, and online courses. As a way to give businesses an incentive to keep workers on payroll, the government is giving financial compensation to firms who are still keeping their workers. Now let's talk about the supply of labor. There are so many people looking for work right now that the labor market is becoming more and more saturated. This means that the competition for jobs is extremely high right now and not helping the overall stress being experienced throughout the world. With uncertain times comes uncertain spending. Even firms who can afford to keep their employees are still taking revenue cuts because people just simply are not spending much money right now. So how is the production of goods being affected by all of this? Many factories are having to limit the numbers of people allowed to work to adhere to the social distancing guidelines. This means that they will not be operating at maximum allocative efficiency. In just these few weeks, I've noticed my orders are taking longer to come in and more things are being backordered. Although online shipping is booming right now, there still needs to be people physically making the goods in the factories and delivering them to your doorstep. The supply of goods. As I had mentioned earlier, even I have noticed a limited supply of goods. There are less people doing the physical labor to get goods out of the factories and into the stores and homes. It takes millions of people to make this happen for everyone, but companies just aren't able to keep the same workforce as they did before the pandemic. The supply chain is backed up and not working at maximum efficiency, as less people are doing the behind-the-scenes magic. As I covered before, the government is having to step in to allocate resources to those who need them most. So how is this pandemic affecting low-income families? Lower-income families will be hit the hardest by this pandemic. This is because these families are already living off the bare minimum and do not have a lot in savings. When their jobs get cut, getting food on the table becomes an issue for many. With a lot of jobs comes health insurance, and once that job is lost, so is the insurance. Healthcare in the United States is extremely pricey and can easily add up to be tens and thousands of dollars. Poor communities and families simply cannot afford health care without going into massive debt. So how does this create a vicious cycle? When families can't afford health care, they go to the doctor as a last resort. This is not a great situation to be in during a pandemic, because if one person gets infected with the virus and does not seek proper medical care, they are putting all of the other members of the community around them at risk. This will ultimately end up in a higher mortality rate due to lack of medical care. It has already been statistically proven that in the United States, that minority groups unfortunately have the highest mortality rate. There is also a higher rate of diabetes and heart disease in low-income families, as often the cheapest foods are not the healthiest. This makes families with less income more vulnerable to the complications caused by the virus. In summary, everything in our economy is interlaced, and when one thing gets plugged up, so does the entire system. Everyone plays a crucial role in the economy, and there's no part more important than the other. Without consumers, there's no one to buy the goods and services. Without producers, there's nothing to buy. Without the government, nothing would be regulated and things probably would not run very smoothly in general. Each and every one of us is highly dependent on the economy, as it is what gives us our basic needs for survival. When one part of the economy fails, there's an effect on everyone, big, small, producer, or consumer. So how has this class changed my perspective? I can honestly say I'd be a lot more confused right now if I had not taken microeconomics. By taking this class, I'm able to have a better understanding of what all is going on around me right now and how it all works. I have learned that we are all dependent on one another to get stuff done, may it be getting the latest iPhone out to millions of consumers or just sitting down and watching Netflix. I've gained a better appreciation of how much work our economy takes and how there are so many variables. Everything affects everything. This class has taught me valuable skills that I can use outside of the classroom.